Thousands of Israelis came together in a mass protest on Wednesday evening as the country grapples with anti-government sentiment over proposed judicial reforms. Hundreds of protesters blocked the Island Highway in Tel Aviv in response to the resignation of district commander. This happened Wednesday night. Esh was criticized by the government authorities for being too soft on the anti-government protests and not using greater force in curbing them. Pictures from Tel Aviv shows Israeli lighting fires, waving flags and crowding the streets. At least 2 cars were seen driving through the protests, and protesters reportedly incurred minor injuries. Netanyahu's proposed plans would remove the reasonability standard, quote unquote, giving the government more power in judicial matters. Critics also fear that the plans would destroy the Israeli system of checks and balances. A special report.
Gridlock and water cannons in Tel Aviv as thousands protest a crisis engulfing the city's police and the country's government. People waving Israeli flags brought traffic to a standstill on Wednesday evening, lighting fires and facing off against police on horseback. The demonstrations came after Tel Aviv's police commander said he was quitting the force. He said he was leaving over political intervention by members of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's hard right cabinet. The commander said he'd been asked to use excessive force against anti-government protesters. Demonstrators voiced their anger on the ground.
This is exactly what you see here in Israel, how dictatorship looks like.
I think this is one step further for Israel to be a non-democratic state.
Tensions ran high throughout the evening, in particular after a car drove through the protest, hitting at least 2 people and knocking one of them to the ground. Tel Aviv District Commander Ami Eshed, the police chief who quit, did not say who gave him the orders to crack down hard on protesters. Far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has reportedly demanded tough action against protesters blocking roads and highways weekly since January. Ben-Gvir said in a statement, quote, "Politics has seeped into the most senior ranks in Israel, and a uniformed officer has caved to senior politicians on the left." The year has seen unprecedented demonstrations against the government's contentious push to overhaul the justice system. Concerns about police independence grew after Ben-Gvir was given greater authority over the force. Despite recanting some of his hardline views, Ben-Gvir's appointment to the Nationalist Religious Coalition government of Netanyahu has alarmed liberals at home and abroad. Other members of Netanyahu's government have claimed that police have treated protesters in Tel Aviv favorably compared to settlers and ultra-Orthodox demonstrators.
My colleague Abhishek Jha is joining us on the special broadcast, getting us more details as to what's happening in Israel right now. Abhishek, give us a sense. We saw those images coming in from Tel Aviv, and these are mass protests which are happening. The judicial reforms had stoked protests in the country even earlier.
So clearly, it looks like the sentiment and the anger, the outrage that was around the judicial overhaul that was very much directed against the current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet is again finding some roots in Israel, because now the police chief has said that he was asked to use excessive force, and since he did not obey one of the cabinet ministers who apparently asked him to do that, now he's being moved to a role which is very marginal in nature, and probably this is the reason why he wants to quit the force. He has been there in the force for 30 years, and this is the time when he had to resign, and he seemed very disappointed the way he was talking to media, and that has created a lot of stir around Israel, and people are once again back to the streets. We have seen for months there has been this protest across Israel on the judicial overhaul that would have given some sort of immunity from persecution to the Israeli Prime Minister. Initially, so much so that the protesters, the entire labor union of Israel had to shut. The strike was international, where the diplomacy of Israel across the world, they went on strike, and that was a very historic and weird moment in a way, because the industries across the world had to shut down because the National Unity Union has called for a strike. Since then, it looked like the things have calmed down, but now once again after the resignation announcement of the police chief, it looks like those protesters who were trying to exercise their democratic right, and they were in a way challenging the alleged dictatorship of Netanyahu, they again have got some momentum in Israel, and Netanyahu will clearly have some tough time in handling that with them.
Netanyahu is having a tough time in handling them. This is all about the freedom that the judiciary in the country really has. And the manner in which Netanyahu has handled the protests and the judiciary has invited criticism from some certain quarters earlier as well. So, Abhishek, going forward, what is it that Netanyahu is likely to do? Is that reasonability, the reasonability clause that's likely to go? Is that a given?
You see, Netanyahu is known as a hardliner. So, even after months of protest, he had to succumb to the, internal pressure and because of the security reason mounting over his government. And he has said that, for that moment, the overhaul was suspended. In a way, it was deferred, and that it was a kind of a stalemate that continued even after that because the protesters continued. They started coming on the streets on the weekends. It just registered that they're still not very happy what the Netanyahu government has done, and Netanyahu meanwhile kept, this judicial overhaul process on a next date and did not take any major decision on it. But now, since the police chief has once again given some fuel to these protesters that okay, their democratic rights were about to be crushed, and he was asked and in a way ordered to crush those mobs and protesters. Another sense of disappointment is sure
Yes.
to go on the streets of Israel, and how Israeli Prime Minister is going to handle it. We have seen he has been a hardliner. He's been very he sort of believes in using force to protect his government. We have seen recently what happened in Jenin, where the Israeli armed forces, in one of the largest sweeping operation in the last 2 decades, had used brutal force. About 10 Palestinian young people were also killed. So we'll have to see how from here onwards Netanyahu is going to handle this democratic rights that has outraged so many Israelis, and they are on the streets.